Hello, and welcome to another edition of BNEWS In Depth. I'm your host, Rich Hosford. This month we are looking into the Community Preservation Act, otherwise known as the CPA, and whether or not Burlington should adopt it. The state program offers matching funds on a surcharge on property taxes for residents and businesses for projects in the areas of affordable housing, historic preservation, recreation, and open space. There's a lot to cover. It's a deep issue. And to start off, we're going to talk to two people who are part of a group pushing for the town to join the CPA to get the basics. Let's take a look. Now to talk about the basics of what the Community Preservation Act is and how it could benefit the town of Burlington. I've got two people very much in the know from the Vote Yes CPA for Burlington, Bill Boyven and Jennifer O'Riordan. Thank you.
Thank you, Rich, and thanks to BCAT for having us present the information about the Community Preservation Act, which we're going to call the CPA for short, because it's easier to say.
Yeah, we're going to keep things nice and simple for everybody.
Exactly. So and Jennifer and I are going to tell you what the CPA is, how it works, and why we think it's a good thing for Burlington.
Excellent. So let's start with the very basics. What is it? What is this Community Preservation Act CPA?
Well, the CPA is a law that was passed in the year 2000 by the then Governor Cellucci. And the CPA allows communities like Burlington to create a completely town-controlled community preservation fund. And monies in this fund can only be expended on four particular program areas. And that is open space protection, historic preservation, affordable housing, and outdoor recreation.
Right, and during the course of this show, we're going to have a little deeper dive with other people on each of those subjects.
Yes,
we'll get to explore them a little bit more fully.
Some of the leaders in those areas from the town will come in to speak. But these four areas were chosen and designated as part of this law because they enhance the quality of life in towns. And they give communities their character. And they historically have never had a continuous, steady funding source. They always have to bit by bit apply for money for different programs and stuff like that. And this would give them a regular, predictable income for those program areas. So 175 municipalities in Massachusetts have already enacted the CPA. That's fully half of the communities in the state. And none have ever opted out, even though the law allows for that to happen. And why have they not done so? Because it's a good deal.
Right. Now, so you saw that the funds are kind of created by, matching from the funds from the state. Where do those state funds come from?
The state funds come from what's called the Community Preservation Trust Fund that the state has set up. And that fund gets its money from a fee on every real estate transaction that occurs in Massachusetts. The fund is used to provide matching funds, as you said, to the CPA community. And currently, the minimum match is 28%. And that's a 28% return on every dollar that Burlington puts into the local CPA fund. The money, there's another source for the CPA fund in Burlington, the local fund.
Right.
And that is that it is raised locally from the imposition of a surcharge or a surtax on residential and commercial real estate taxes in town. The CPA committee has conferred with community leaders, representatives on all four of the supported programs. The act allows for surtaxes of up to 3%. Based on the input we received from discussions with all of those groups, we are recommending that we start with a surtax of 1.5%. And that is the most common amongst all of the communities in the Commonwealth.
Okay, so it'd be 1.5% tax increase. Now, is this something that if the town puts in more, that they get more from the state? How's the kind of that mechanism work?
Well, you don't get the option of putting anything any more than the surtax.
Okay.
So whatever goes in, the state matches based on how much is in your pool. A smaller community or a community with a different tax rate would have a different base in their fund, and then their 28% would mean something different. The communities, and there are a few that elected to go with a maximum 3% rate, they actually get a higher percentage match when it first started this program to encourage even more people to contribute at a higher level. But from what we gather, discussing with people in the community, 1.5% is where we're going to start.
Now, I know that 1.5% doesn't sound like a lot, but there are some people who have, some difficulties with making ends meet. Are there exemptions? Are there ways for people to kind of maybe low income or seniors, things like people in certain situations?
There are. First of all, I want to make it clear that it's not a 1.5% tax. It's a 1.5% surtax. And that means the real estate tax, which is currently in Burlington for residential properties, is $10.48 per thousand. That's 1.048%. And this is a 1.5% increase on that 1.048%. So it increases it not by 1.5, but
right.
it turns 1.048 into 1.064. So it's a tiny little 0.0 or whatever increase in the property tax rate. And just to put that in dollars and cents for the average taxpayer homeowner in Burlington, the average property value in Burlington for residential real estate is $505,000. The current taxes that are being paid on that is $5,292. With this proposed increase, it would go up to $5,357, which is a $67 increase or $65 increase. To put this another way, your quarterly tax bill of over $1,300 would go up by $16. It's not much of an increase, but it is an increase nonetheless. And so, why would we ask someone to vote for such an increase? And the answer is because of the return, because as I mentioned, it is a good deal financially. Remember that commercial property owners in Burlington pay 60% of the property tax.
Right.
So they would be putting 60% of the money into this fund. So if you think about that, each dollar that a residential taxpayer puts into the fund would be matched with $1.50 from the commercial part of the real estate tax base, and 28 cents from state matching, the 28%. So your dollar becomes $2.78. That is a heck of a return.
Right, and it's for programs that benefit the community at large, like you said, in those 4 areas. So
absolutely,
it's a more efficient way of raising some funds to kind of help the town pursue projects that it might want to undertake.
Exactly, and we estimated it would raise about $1.5 to $2 million a year. And you get that every year, regardless of the state budget situation or anything. It comes from this pool that exists and is done for this specific purpose. And back to your question about exemptions for people who might not be able to afford this. We thought about that a lot, and we plan to propose 3 different exemptions. First of all, the first $100,000 of all property tax assessments would not be subject to this surtax. So that applies to all residential and all commercial properties. And that'll have the largest reward for properties of the lowest value or the smallest businesses. Something like Burlington Mall with tens of millions of dollars of property value is $100,000 deduction is not going to mean much.
Right.
But for the average homeowner or someone who has a relatively small asset, like a $300,000, $350,000 small house, subtracting the first $100,000 is a significant deduction. And then there are 2 other income-based exemptions. One is for low-income families. And this is based on the definition of low income by the federal and state numbers. And that is a family of 1 with under $60,000 a year of income, or a family of 2 with around $69,000 and under would be completely exempt from any of this surtax. And then we have another exemption that we are proposing, and that is a moderate income seniors exemption. So if the homeowners are 60 years or older, then a family of 1 with $75,000 or less of income, a family of 2 with $86,000 or less would be totally exempt from this property tax increase.
So the idea is to have this surcharge to help the community vote without putting anybody who's on the line, in any more difficulty.
Exactly.
Very good. Jen, I wanted to make sure that you're in here too. So my question to you is, how does the money that the town, accumulates gets spent?
So basically there are some separate accounts that are set up that money will go into. And there's different allocations within that fund. And every year 10% will go to each of those different allocations. So open space and recreation would share one pot. There'd be one spot for funding. There's also a pot for administrative costs, obviously running a program like this, but there's no more than 5% that's allocated to that. And then there's a general fund, which is where 65% of the remaining amount goes. So that general account can be spent on any one of those 4 areas, and people can submit applications to say, we want it to go to this. People don't have to spend that money immediately, so the town wouldn't have to spend that 10% every year. You could save it up, which is nice. So for example, one of the pots is historical, which I know you'll be speaking with in this segment as well. If they said, we have a project that we need to save up $75,000 for, they could allow that to accrue over several years for something like that. So it gets allocated to all the different areas to make sure that everyone gets the right amount. So.
And if this gets passed and the funds start to build, and is it just committees that have access to it, or is it, or residents who can, if somebody has a great idea that they want to propose, who can make an application?
So actually anyone can submit an application to get a project funded, residents, businesses, as long as it targets one of those 4 specific areas. So anyone can actually apply.
And once an application is submitted, what's the process? Who decides?
Yep. So there's going to be a local community preservation committee that is set up after this, after it hopefully is passed. Members will be appointed by the selectman or by the town moderator. There can be up to 9 members on that particular committee. There has to be representation though from Planning Board, Conservation Commission, the Housing Authority, Recreation Commission, and the Historical Commission, obviously to make sure there's appropriate representation. Sure. There's also 4 at-large members that can be appointed to that particular committee. We actually are going to make the recommendation that members of the business community will be on there as well, since they're contributing about 60% of the tax revenue that goes into that particular fund. That particular committee, the CPC or the Community Preservation Committee, would then receive all the applications, review them, and then the process is for them to make a recommendation to town meeting to vote for approval for those particular projects. So it would go through the committee and then to town meeting, and then town meeting would approve those expenditures if they were approved.
So at that point, it works like other town expenditures.
Absolutely.
Has to get the legislative branch to sign off on them.
I'd like to make a point, if I could, about
Absolutely.
the business community. We did have extensive conversations with the Burlington Area Chamber of Commerce. And you might say, well, why would they be interested in these programs here? And the answer that we were given is that they need to recruit people to come to work in Burlington.
Right.
And people who, we have a lot of business and a lot of people who are coming here to work. One of the things that makes it attractive for a business to offer new employees is amenities like walking trails or being able to bicycle to work from Arlington or Cambridge or something like that.
Sure.
So this type of programs can help that. Affordable housing for some of their employees is a factor as well. So they are, the discussions with them have indicated that they have some benefits from this that they're interested in.
Yeah, I mean, we talk a lot about, how businesses are attracted to come here, and a lot of times amenities get brought up, but it's usually we've got great restaurants, we got the mall, but this is kind of makes it more balanced with things like recreation and open space.
Exactly.
Very good. So we keep talking about, if this gets passed, if we do this. So I guess flip that and say, how does this get passed? What are the steps necessary in order to, for Burlington to either, I don't know is it adopt or join the CPA, but how does it happen?
Well, the first step is actually well underway. We're working on educating the community about what the CPA is, how it works, and how it would be such a great benefit for our community. So we're working to get the message out. So this is one of our, first big steps. So thank you for allowing us to come here and do this today. We've made a lot of presentations to different commissions, boards. We also had a general public group that met to talk to people about this. And so the next step is really to take a presentation to the town meeting and convince them to put the CPA on the town ballot so that we can vote for it as a community. But really, right now we're working on educating the community so that they understand that it's a huge benefit for us to adopt this.
And what's the time frame are we looking at? Are we looking at January town meeting, a town election, a presidential election? What do you get? What's sort of the goal? I know things can change, but where are you kind of thinking right now?
So currently, in speaking with other towns that have been able to adopt this, the most successful towns have been able to do that by having it during a presidential election, because the most people come out to vote during that.
Most participation by far.
Which would be great. So that is our current goal. However, that may change. We do have a website that we've set up, which is yescpaburlington.org, that we would encourage people to check out, so they can attend meetings, learn more about it, and that's when when there are more final decisions about which town meeting it should go to have people vote on it. It'll be posted there for sure.
Okay, and we'll put that up.
Town meeting can alter the proposal. I mean, we're just going to write a warrant that says 1.5%, $100,000 exemption, income exemptions. Town meeting can say, we don't want this feature, or we want 3%, or at town meeting it can be changed to something that is, approvable.
Right. And one more time, we will put it up, but it's yescpa.org.
It's yescpaburlington.org.
Yescpaburlington.org. So we'll put that on the screen so people can find it. So I just want to, I know we're going to have, you've got some closing arguments that you want to make. A couple of things I just want to highlight, because we've had a lot of information come out in the last 15 minutes or so. So a couple of things just to kind of hit back on. One, more than half of the communities in Massachusetts already are part of this. And I know from other presentations that you've had that people can find on our website, a lot of our area communities, surrounding Burlington, have adopted this. Some of them have for quite early on and have been using these funds for various projects that you highlighted in that initial presentation. And I think one of the things that maybe didn't come through clear enough is that these funds come from the state. The state funds come from real estate interactions, right? Real estate.
Correct.
And I don't know many towns in Massachusetts that have more real estate interactions than Burlington.
So true.
So we've been funding a lot of these other communities for quite a while now.
Absolutely.
With all the
We've been
growth that
putting
we've had
money
in town.
Yes. We have been putting money into this fund since the year 2000 when it started with all of our real estate transactions.
Right.
And other towns have been divvying that up. So we have gotten nothing out. And that we'll continue to put it in, and, whether we sign this or not. So.
I mean, there's always projects happening in town. So,
right.
So I'll leave it up to either of you, both of you, just your final pitch before we move on to the rest of the show, where we'll look at these 4 different components in more depth. What would you say to people watching to, get them on board, maybe get them involved?
Well, a couple of things that I would like to reemphasize. One, financially, it is a really good deal. Every residential dollar that gets put up ends up with $2.78 in the fund from the commercial and the state match. The commercial interests are not against it. We've discussed with them, and there are some benefits that they see that could come out of this. And their input helped us to come up with a recommendation of 1.5% and the $100,000 exemption to being applied to residential and commercial. So it does seem to have a favorable reception so far from everyone we've talked to, and it is a good deal. And as you mentioned, Rich, we are contributing already, and we're getting nothing out. So I think it's an opportunity to start playing, both sides, the giving and the getting from the state fund.
All right. Anything else that we haven't touched upon that you think is important for people to know? I know it's been like I said, quite a bit of information, and we will have more on the different parts of it. But just getting people ready for that and ready for the next step. Anything else that we need to touch on?
I certainly hope that all the viewers and all town voters will learn about the CPA. They'll look at the website, they'll watch the videos, they'll hear other things that will come up in the future. We're going to have some press releases and try to write some letters to the editor and get some publicity out for why this is a good deal. And I hope they'll come on board and support it. I think it is a good deal, and obviously 175 communities agree with me.
All right.
Yeah. It's a great investment for our town. So.
Very good. Well, now we're going to move on and look at the different parts of it individually, but I wanted to thank you guys for coming in, giving us the basics and, sort of all the background people need to kind of understand this moving forward. So appreciate your time.
Thank you for having us.
All right.
Thank you very much.
Thank you.
So now that we have a grasp of how this Community Preservation Act works, how it's funded, how the town could join, and what benefits might accrue from doing so, we're going to take a deep dive into the 4 areas of focus the CPA touches upon: affordable housing, historic preservation, recreation, and open space. I have a variety of guests who focus on those areas in particular, and we're going to talk to each of them in turn. Let's check it out. All right, to talk about the affordable housing aspect of the Community Preservation Act, I am now joined by Housing Authority Executive Director Anne Marie Moglia. Anne, thanks for joining me.
Thanks for having me.
So I just wanted to start off, if the town, were to adopt the CPA, with the shorthand has been established, so we're going with that.
Yeah.
How would that, help or benefit or impact the Housing Authority?
So the Housing Authority would be able to use the funds to pursue maybe some grant opportunities and partnership with some other agencies to increase our overall portfolio. We are a pretty small agency. Our affordable housing is limited. We only have 105 elderly units, elderly disabled, and we have 3 3-bedroom units and then 1 unit that can be housed with a person of any, doesn't have to be elderly or disabled, just any person. Beyond that, we don't have a lot of other affordable options. Our waiting lists are years and years long. There's nearly 2,000 people on our waiting list waiting for those units. We have no 2-bedrooms. Our units are affordable. They are based on a percentage of the family's income. So we do find that there is a struggling need in the community just to sustain basic everyday living expenses. So increasing our affordable housing portfolio would be a great benefit to the community as a whole.
Yes, you said a waiting list of about 2,000 people.
Yes.
And how many units open up on average per year?
So in our elderly disabled, we only have about 6. In some years it's as high as 12. The past year it's been 12. And in this current year so far it's only 4 to date. Our 3-bedroom family units haven't turned over at all in the past couple of years. So our options are limited. People wait a very long time for affordable housing.
Yeah, and with a lot of people wanting to work and live around Burlington, it's a strong community, so having more options available for people, I think, would definitely be a good benefit.
Right. Burlington is a great town to live in. Rents are very high. I find families are having to move out of the community in order just to find any kind of housing at all. So it's unfortunate that we are pushing our local residents out of the community to find more affordable housing.
Right. And we talked about some of the different types of people. Talk about, we'll go through kind of a list, but starting with seniors. I know there's a lot of talk in town. People have been in their homes for a long time. Maybe it's getting a little bit too large of a responsibility. Talk about the need for more senior housing in town. So
again, we only have 105 senior housing units, and actually 13.5% of those units have to be housed with individuals that are under 60 and disabled. We refer to them as young disabled. So it's only about 87 of those units that are housed with actually seniors. The rest is the population need for young disabled is great as well, but for the elderly, you only have 87 units to work with, and the turnover is just not very high. So families do come up with the time where they cannot afford to even pay their local taxes. They're now retiring. Their homes are too large. The maintenance costs are exceeding their annual income,
right.
And they look to move out, and there really is not a viable place for them to go. As they come into the authority, there is no aging in place opportunity for them. So as they age and get older, they have to maybe go into nursing homes or move out and live with family so that they can get all the supportive services they need. So it would be a great opportunity to maybe have some collaborative supportive services in place to allow families and individuals elderly to age in place and stay in their homes rather than coming from their home to elderly housing and then out to a nursing home. There should be some kind of a filler gap in between that for them.
Right. Big need. And what about, there's also the other end, young people who are, trying to make a start, maybe have a good job, but it doesn't, they're still low and they haven't gotten, the paycheck that they'll eventually get.
Right.
What's there now for that kind of population, and what would you like to see more of?
Well, we only have three-bedroom units. We have no two-bedroom units. So we're just not addressing any of the family needs. As rents in Boston increase and come up north, families are moving out of the area just as the same themselves. They can't keep their kids in the school system. They can't maintain themselves here in Burlington without more affordable housing for them. So we would like to increase our housing portfolio in all aspects, the elderly, the disabled, and the families, to keep our families and the people that are working in the community, living in the community as well as working.
And have you, gone through and looked at, with the proposal of the 1.5% from the residents and the commercial base and the matching money from the state, what do you see, on the ground being able to do, in the years ahead if the CPA is adopted?
So I see the first thing I would like to do is probably hire a consultant to determine what the greatest need in Burlington is, and get some advice as how to best address those needs. A consultant could help identify some additional resources, some grant opportunities, some other agencies that we could perhaps partner with, help us find some land or some other property to purchase, to renovate, to put some affordable housing in place. It would be great to have some really statistical data as to what the greatest need in Burlington is. We all think we know, what is the actual real need. It would be nice to see that in concrete, black and white paper, and then proceed accordingly with the needs of Burlington to further housing for the entire community.
Very good. And last thing I just want to bring up, because I know some people will be watching this and they'll be like, we have this affordable 40B project going on, and there's different units. Talk about the difference between the corporate owned and what your agency does, and because the requirements are different, the way that it's structured is different.
The way it is structured is definitely different. Our families pay a strict percentage of the income, 30% of their income. And families in a 40B project, they are renting you at a lesser market rate. So, for example, the market rate unit may, for a one bedroom, maybe $2,095. For an affordable unit, it may be $1,600 or $1,700, which is, so the term affordable is a little bit fuzzy when it comes to on the ground affordable, writing the check. So it seems like, oh, that's a great opportunity for your family, but to actually, make that kind of rental payment monthly, I question the term affordable in the real living sense of the word affordable. Our housing is affordable because it's based on your income, and it's still a struggle for families to pay 30% of your gross income. It's tough to pay for families. That is a big chunk when all your other costs remain stagnant. Your cable, your electricity, your heat, those are all pretty fixed cost.
Right. But it's different.
It is different.
There's less requirements.
So I did talk with some of the 40B property managers. They do have affordable housing. Their waiting list far exceed the number of available units they had. I just talked with one complex. They have a little over 200 units, and they have about 50 of those units are affordable. There's 150, 60 people on the waiting list waiting for those units. So the affordable units are not exactly addressing the affordable needs of the community as well. So there's definitely a housing shortage in this area. Right. You can see that on the news every single day, and it is not improving. It's only getting worse. So additional funding opportunities and grant opportunities would be really beneficial to the community as a whole.
Right. So we might be meeting that 10% mark as a town, but there's still a need beyond that.
There's a huge need beyond that. Yeah, there really is.
Well, let's see what happens, and if this passes, hopefully it benefits your organization in all the right ways. All right.
Thank you very much.
I appreciate you coming in.
Thanks for having me.
All right, thank you.
All right.
And now to talk about the historical preservation part of the Community Preservation Act, I am joined by two members of both the Historical Society and Historical Commission, Mike Trudeau and Peter Coppola. Thanks for joining me.
Thank you for having us.
So I mentioned that you were part of both of those organizations. Very briefly, what's the difference between the two?
The difference is that the Historical Society is a social organization. It's open to anyone. Mm-hmm. The dues are really quite modest, and we get together to discuss historical stories, different parts of history. The Historical Commission is actually members appointed by the Board of Selectmen. So we are an official part of the town of Burlington, and we are charged with education and preservation of history here in Burlington.
Now I know one of the things that comes up a lot
is, obviously the goal is historical preservation, but that can be quite costly. What's the current state of funding in Burlington for historical preservation?
Well, right now we receive about $3,000 or $4,000 a year in our budget, and half of that is dedicated toward the restoration and acquisition of items. And these items could be anything from a small kitchen, household gardening hand tool, up to a table or a cabinet or a chair. So we're able to take care of that because the money has already been allocated to the Historic Commission to do those things. Whereas a large capital expenditure, regardless, it could be a piece of property, it could be a historic home or facility, it would require a warrant article to be approved by town meeting in order to acquire that asset, and in many instances that asset is already sold off before we can go through that exercise.
Right, because it's a process.
Yes, and a lot of times things happen fast. Something will come up, it will be available for a short time, and as Peter said, sold, say, to a developer. And there's no time to put together a warrant article, get it before town meeting, get approval before it's gone. So, for example, I believe you're a little bit off on our current budget. Our current budget averages total about $10,000.
Okay.
We use that for restoration of the artifacts that we already have. And Peter has been doing yeoman's work on that. He's been working, my hat's off to you, Peter. He's been taking all of the old assets that we've been looking at and crying over for years and getting them into shape. When it comes to capital preservation, and at this point I'm going to digress a little bit and go to my little prop here.
Okay.
This is a preservation survey that the Commission put together in 1999 for the bicentennial, listing properties here in town which were of historical value, which should be preserved. And right now I could take about a quarter of this book, tear it out and throw it away. We've lost about 25% of the properties listed in this book in the last 20 years.
To development.
To development. And the only thing we have to combat that at this time is what's called the demolition delay, which we can delay getting a demolition permit for 6 months while we try to get some other remedy to demolition of historic property. What we've found, however, is that once it gets to the point of voting for a demolition delay, the property is virtually gone. Developers will build 6 months into their plans, and they'll just simply wait us out.
Right.
So acquiring the property, or what I think should happen, is helping the property owner take care of their property themselves, rather than the town acquiring it. That still is a lot more money than we have available. Plus the fact, as anyone would know, a budget for a commission like ours is voted year to year, and it comes under the heading of use it or lose it. At the end of the fiscal year, if you haven't spent it, it's rotated
back to the
back.
general fund.
Right.
The CPA, on the other hand, would allow us to basically save our nickels and dimes for emergencies.
Right, you can roll it over. You don't have to
That's
spend
right.
it. And how would it change your approach to historical preservation? Just, having those funds. I know town meeting still has to, approve them, but knowing that there's money more than the $10,000 budget set aside, specifically for those type of projects.
Within the current town center district that the town meeting approved with the planning board, that would be where the two parks are and all the buildings around it. Within that are a number of historic homes. Mm-hmm. Right now they're used as office buildings or other activities, a service station. We would be able to work with those property owners when they're trying to do some renovation work, especially on the outside, to try to make it more historic looking, like it looked originally 150 years ago.
Right.
So we would be able to work with them and have the funds to help them do the changes to the exterior of the property.
I'll give you a more concrete example. There is a building which we refer to as the Hens and Chickens Tavern.
Mm-hmm.
The former owner of that house literally went bankrupt trying to maintain it. It went into receivership and was sold to a couple who now own it. And we were terrified that we were going to get the demolition notice on that house because it is one of the original homes of Burlington. And happily, they've been working to bring it back to snuff, but the first thing they did was call me and ask what the Historic Commission could do to help them in preserving their home. And the answer from me had to be nothing. We simply have no funds. We can't put together a warrant article, as far as I know, to aid a private
Right. Like a private residence.
residence. But what I'm hoping is we may be able to do something like that, either on a low-cost loan or an outright grant with strings attached or something like that. We have not pursued this simply because there's no funds have been available.
Right. You didn't have the mechanism to do so. Now, I know you were talking, about when the example of, a developer comes in and they want to, take over and tear down, a place that could have historical significance. Would having a reserve fund just sort of change how you can approach that situation? Like, obviously town meeting still needs to approve the expense, but if you know that, we have some funds available to possibly purchase this, does that change how you can, approach the situation?
We had a situation down by the mall on Lexington Street,
Yeah.
where a developer purchased the land and was planning to do some demolition, actually demo the whole property and put up some condominiums. And had we the resources, we would have just purchased that property from the developer and then done our own thing there. So our only recourse under the current situation is we asked the developer for permission to go in, and we literally ripped out anything of historic value, some paneling and
Yeah.
some wrought iron and things like that. We just went in and grabbed whatever we could before they started demolitioning the property.
Oh, okay. Yeah, we had a whole show about that property a couple of years ago, and now I didn't know exactly what had come out from that. Are there, so if this passes, other, projects or properties or ideas that you have that you think, this would allow, with the matching funds from the state, you to do that you can't do right now?
I think what we need to do is amend the bylaws so that, or whatever it would take in order for us to be notified when a property came up for sale. For example, right now the only notification we get is when it's going to be demolished.
Right.
So having a prior notice like that would be helpful. And having funds that are literally earmarked for preservation, for historical work, that would be a great deal, rather than having to compete with all the other needs of Burlington. I mean, if we had to go against, say, education, I'd say education would probably win out, because that is a absolute #1 priority for a community. But if the funds are already set aside and earmarked for historic preservation, I think we'd have a much easier time.
And what would you say, make the argument in general for historical preservation? I mean, I've talked to people in Burlington, and they kind of lament that, obviously it has its nice spots, but it doesn't have some of the emphasis that, say, a Lexington or a Concord does. Talk about, just for residents, just as a community, why it's so important to, make an emphasis of preserving the town's history.
Well, one of the things that the commission is doing now is actively telling people, do not throw away any items post World War II. We transitioned from a farm economy in 1940 to a residential community in 1945 with all the businesses that came in. We had a situation like the stone house on the what is now Middlesex Turnpike Extension. Post World War II, that became an office building for RCA, and the addition that's on the back of the building was used to house Abrams tanks. That's where they tested and did work on Abrams tanks. And the hill across the street, that whole area, Middlesex Turnpike Extension, and that hill across the street that Sun Micro developed was where they ran the tanks and other vehicles. All of that went on in Burlington. Nobody knows about that. We have so much history in homes. One RCA retiree gave us notebooks with photographs from Apollo 8 through Apollo 17, mission photographs and things like that. We have those in the library and the basement of the museum. They would have been thrown away. So we're seeing a lot of history post World War II now that's ending up in the dumpster, and we are literally dumpster diving and calling people and asking them, don't throw these away, give us a call.
Okay.
That's the change that's going on. That's what's so important. People don't know our history. They may not care about the Civil War anymore. They may not care about the Revolutionary War. And they, especially the younger generation, they don't care about their grandparents and their parents' goods. They're just throwing them in a dumpster.
The other thing is you were talking about the comparison to Lexington and Concord. Lexington and Concord have turned history into an industry.
Right.
And they really emphasize that in their local makeup. Burlington has been, up until the time of the Route 128 coming through, a very, very quiet farming community. And that is the history of this town that we have to talk about. We don't have revolutionary battles. We have farms.
Right. But there's still a lot of interesting history out there
It is
to
interesting.
explore.
Well, you'll be amazed at how many people don't know that we are Native Americans living here.
Right.
How many people don't know that we had a Medal of Honor, Congressional Medal of Honor winner. How many people don't know that we had troops fight in every major conflict going back to the Revolutionary War. There's so many things that people don't know about the town because they only view us today as a technology town, and our history only goes back to 1945.
Right.
And that's about it.
Yeah, that's definitely not the case. All right. Last thing, I guess, is just, we talked about sites. If you had CPA funds, any upgrades to the museum or any other sort of things like that that would be possible?
We're still looking for a storage shed.
Right, that's right.
We need that. There are homes within town, the Hens and Chickens Tavern, Francis Wyman House. We can work with them still. They've been working with us for years, hand in hand. The home on Lexington Street, it's still there. There's still possibilities there. We can.
There's a whole list of things that,
Right.
that would, if we had the funds, we'd be able to prioritize and say, yeah, let's go try to tackle that one right away. And then some more long-term things, like I said earlier, within the town center district, there was a smaller district that we would call the historical center, going from the church, the cemetery, Simon's Park, the Commons, all along Bedford Street, all the way to the center school.
Right.
That would all be part of our history. So we do have a historic district. We just haven't defined it yet.
Well, very good. And if this passes, and I wish you all the best in tackling some of these important projects. And I think we're about out of time, but I'd like to thank you both for coming in and talking about this part of the Community Preservation Act and sharing all your knowledge and expertise.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Joining me now to talk about the recreation part of the Community Preservation Act is somebody who couldn't find a better guest, 17 years on the Recreation Commission, currently the Vice Chair, Kevin Sullivan.
Oh, thank you, Rich.
Okay.
Chairperson this year.
Chairperson this
And
year.
moved up.
Oh, the website needs to be updated then.
Right, we take turns.
I know, it's a rotating service, so even better to have you on.
Yes, thank you.
So what are some of the ways that, if Burlington were to join with the Community Preservation Act, how would that impact, the funding of recreation activities in town?
Well, it probably wouldn't change things much at all. With the Community Preservation Act, you're still going to have to go in front of town meeting and go through the same process of going for a warrant article and getting permission to spend money on certain articles, whether it's field renovations, lights, pool, whatever. You still have to get approval from town meeting. The big difference is that if you're in CPA, Community Preservation Act, is that the state could be giving 11 to 38% of the money towards the project. So in essence, we would be saving the money, the town money, on projects that we were going to do no matter what.
Okay, so it's two ways of looking at it, I guess. You can either add it to what we already do or kind of have it cover some of the costs of what we'd already be doing.
Yeah, anything that involves recreation could be covered under Community Preservation Act. How it'll evolve, whether the group that there'll be a 5-person or more group that decides where the money gets spent or makes a recommendation to town meeting. I presume the Recreation Department is going to have a lot of input on what we want our portion or some of the portion to be used for.
Now, if we let's, for the sake of argument, look at it aspirationally and say we're adding this money to what is already being spent. What are some of the projects that are out there that, might be accomplished that might not otherwise if, just for funding restrictions?
We could, little things would be playgrounds being redone. They're 20 years old. Those are simple things that are going to be coming. Big things from master plan and our own surveys, people have asked about a community pool. That could be covered. People have talked about bike trails. We would love in the future to have a recreation facility, a building that would be like a field house and be able to offer programs and maybe have the pool attached. That's a dream. If you had money stored for years that could take in help with the project, it might be doable.
Yeah, so it's not necessarily, as we've discussed in previous parts of this, you don't have to spend the money every year. You can save up for things. In other ways that, your argument, in other ways that this would, just sort of help recreational activities in town, which are already very strong. I mean, I don't think anybody would argue with that. But like your pitch, if somebody asks you, why should we pursue this? Okay,
so last year's town meeting warrant was the lights at the tennis courts at Simons Park, about $200,000. That came right out of the town's funds. If we'd used CPA funds, that $200,000 would have been $180,000 of town money and about $20,000 of CPA funds. $20,000 state contribution towards CPA. So, that where else can we get a return of 11% or more on money? It would make sense. It would be, if I could get 11% on my bank account, I would go to it. So we'd be saving money on our projects, $20,000 on the lighting, for example.
Yeah, and are there other things upcoming that are sort of on the radar that these funds could help with? I know you've mentioned playgrounds.
Playgrounds, bathrooms at maybe Marvin Field or at Wildwood Park. We did that at Rahanis and it was a huge success, replacing porta potties with a permanent bathroom.
Always more desirable.
Yeah, a spray park is come up on our wish list. Instead of the wading pool in a different park, maybe a spray park. That would be a summer activity. And then in the winter, you could make that spray park into our ice skating rink. All things that would be great projects. The Recreation Department, we try to be responsible on what we ask for from the town. Maintaining what we have or improving it some, and then you have your wish list of what
Right.
would be wonderful things. And when it comes to the wish list, we try to be really resourceful on it. Like TRW Park, we just did an athletic exercise equipment,
Right.
and the Leahy Clinic sponsored like $80,000 of the project. You know, so my hats off go to Brendan Egan, our director, and Kelly Lehman, the recreation programming person that go out and seek these funds, but having extra funds to go after projects and make things better and bring new things to Burlington would be awesome.
Yeah, so even more partnerships in this one,
Right.
with the state through this program.
Yeah.
All right. Well, it seems like we've covered the basics of what people need to know about how the CPA and Parks and Recreation Department would, possibly work. I want to thank you for coming in and sharing your thoughts with us.
Oh, thank you very much. I hope it passes.
Absolutely.
All right. Thank you.
Thank you very much. I'm now joined by Larry Cohen, who is part of the Vote Yes CPA for Burlington, and he's here to talk about the open space aspect of the Community Preservation Act. Larry, thanks for joining us.
Rich, thank you for having me.
So I just want to double back real quick. Just talk about what is the Vote Yes CPA for Burlington?
The Vote Yes CPA for Burlington committee is essentially a citizens ballot question committee. And it was formed to promote one issue, and that is to promote the issue of Burlington considering the adoption of the Community Preservation Act. And so it is an advocacy group. Obviously, they're advocating for people to vote yes, and there'll be two opportunities to vote yes. The first will be our town meeting members will get an opportunity to vote yes on putting the question on the ballot.
Right.
And then at a subsequent election, either the local or the state election, the presidential election in November, it will be as an official ballot question for our voters to answer.
Right. So it'll be open to all voting residents.
Right. And I should add that the committee is being run by a town meeting member, John Sachs. He is chairing the committee, and the treasurer is Monty Pearson.
Okay, great. Now you're here to talk about the open space aspect of it. What currently is the how's the funding for open space projects work in town right now?
Well, when people think of open space, they often think of acquiring new lands. Unfortunately, in Burlington, as our voters are very much aware, there's not a lot of open space left.
Right.
So given that the town is almost fully developed, then our efforts at acquiring new open space projects tend to revolve around where a parcel or group of parcels become available adjacent to existing and conservation areas, where we can enlarge the conservation areas or where it has habitat value. So they don't come around too often. As far as I can talk a little bit about some of those opportunities that have come around.
Sure.
We have had off of Mill Street, for example, there's a road called Sawmill Brook Road, and we had not too long ago 3 parcels that potentially came available adjacent to our Sawmill Conservation Area there. We went before town meeting, and we told town meeting there was a possibility of getting a grant, and they would fund a portion of it, being the town's portion, and then a grant. Town meeting considered the question and said, yes, we will vote you the funds, but we're not going to make it dependent upon you getting the grant. It was an unconditional grant that if we didn't get the grant, that they would then pay for the parcels. That deal fell apart. Okay, not for any reasons that, on our end. It was the seller decided not to keep it on the market at this time. But that's an example of how currently open space projects that involve a certain amount of money are handled. We go before a town meeting and we asked for a warrant article that essentially votes the money. And having said that, whenever conservation, which I am also a member of, have gone to town meeting has been very good to conservation. We usually find that our town meeting members have been very responsive to our requests.
Okay, so they've been open too.
They've been very much open. Now, the Community Preservation Act has an additional dimension, because not only will they have to consider where the money comes from, say from the stabilization account, or wherever they're going to take the money, or the current budget, this money would already be in reserve
Right.
for open space type projects among the other areas that it's available for. So it makes it somewhat easier. Town meeting still has the say under the Community Preservation Act, but that money is already set aside as one of the major purposes.
Right, so there'd be money, sort of like a reserve of funds for
There'd be a reserve of
open
funds.
space projects.
But at the same time, if we're asking for a $300,000 transfer, for example, of money to approve a purchase of some parcel of land, you have to appreciate that the money that's in the fund for the Community Preservation Act has been matched in part
Right.
from the state trust fund. And that could be, we think it's going to be, with the new legislation, we think it's going to be 28%. It could be as high as 40% if Governor Baker keeps putting in monies from any surpluses left over. So so the difference is, it is still town money. The difference is, it has been subsidized by the state match, which we have not been taking advantage of.
Exactly. And what are some, possible future projects, both large and small, that you see as, as potential uses for CPA funds?
Well, there's really three categories of projects.
Okay.
Let me start with the small ones first,
Yeah.
and then talk about the larger projects. The first category of projects is, as I previously mentioned, is acquiring additional parcels of land. There are limited opportunities for that, given that we're mostly fully developed. Off of Mill Street, there's probably 5 or 6 acres that are held privately that are adjacent to that area. It would be nice to have some additional parking off of Mill Street. We only have room for 1 or 2 cars there. And it would enhance the existing conservation area. Off of the Mill Pond Conservation Area, off of Chandler Street, there's another parcel that we've had our eye on for a while. And then the other open space is, I think it's 7 acres, somewhere near 7 acres down on Lexington Street. On Lexington Street, there is a former farming parcel. It currently has an agricultural exemption and has been paying lower taxes because of that to the town. But if it becomes available, the town has the right of first refusals. So what could we do with that? I can think of perhaps having another conservation area. Mm-hmm. I could think of the town recreation department says, hey, we would like some active recreation facilities. And the folks that are thinking, hey, we need more cemetery space, could potentially use it for that. We talked about, running out of cemetery space. So in the case of active and passive recreation and open space, Community Preservation Act funds could be used. In the case if we were converting a parcel of land to another cemetery, that would probably not be an allowed use.
Okay. So those are possible. So those are some of the projects,
Those are some of the
little
projects, and for acquiring land and anything that has habitat value or enhances the existing habitat value, folks who are in favor of open space would be, I think, very much in favor of. Now, you asked about other things. Now, there's also another small category of projects, and that is the enhancements to our existing conservation areas. It is true that we are fortunate to have the Scouts doing various projects.
Yes.
Okay, and that we think that is absolutely terrific. But there are some circumstances where some investment might be required. Certainly on enhancing parking facilities to allow more parking. information kiosks, benches, wayfaring signs, introduction signs at the entrance to our conservation areas. All of those need upgrading, and we could spend some funds on that and even join forces with the scouts to help us get it installed, things like that.
Excellent. So it's not just, the funds aren't just for acquiring new open spaces, they can be used for enhancements for what's already there.
That's correct. Now, the third and last category is the one that's most exciting, and it is the larger projects that, frankly, I would like to offer to you that could be transformational for the town.
Really?
Okay, and for the first, as many people know, if you want bike paths, for example, for either commuting or recreation, for the most part, Burlington doesn't offer that right now. But the closest bike path, which some people may not be familiar with, is in the south end of town, beyond the quarry business, off of Adams Street. You then go around the corner to North Street, which is right in the Burlington. There is a paved bike trail that actually ends right there. Many people may not be aware of it, but there is the possibility of starting at that location on North Street in Lexington, which is right at the Burlington line, and bring a bike trail. Many people have talked about the possibility of a bike trail all the way up to 3rd Ave. And some people would say, well, how would we do that? Well, it turns out that that a concept has been laid out that would go from North Street, perhaps through either Adams or stay on North Street, and would go up through some forested land off of Adams Street. The town of Burlington actually owns a substantial amount of vacant land at that point. If you are on the Friend Lumber side, there is about a 4 to 5 acre parcel of land right off of Adams Street. On the other side, there is actually 13 acres of land, maybe 9 or 10 of which are owned by the Burlington Housing Authority. And it goes all the way up partway and sort of comes very close to touching the top of Summit Ave, where the buildings are there. And so the concept is as follows. We make a connection that goes through the town of Burlington land from the existing, where the paved bike trail ends on North Street, and then makes its way up through Summit Ave and comes down into right before the intersection on Middlesex Turnpike, where 128 goes over one Middlesex Turnpike. It would then, the bike path would then go under. You'd have to have a protected, it's wide enough, it'd have to be made protected, and then would possibly swing behind Del Fresco's and up behind the Barnes & Noble and the new Yard House that's coming in, and then would make its way all the way to 3rd Ave.
So kind of behind, up around the movie theater.
Now, why would we do that? Well, it turns out that we, as a citizens committee, have gone to the Chamber of Commerce and asked what they think of that. And it turns out that the Chamber of Commerce said that one of the important amenities that would help them compete for business in the Burlington area is to have a bike trail so that people in Lexington and Bedford who want to commute by bicycle and avoid all that traffic, they would then have an easy way of doing that. I'd like to tell you that perhaps people could go all the way to Alewife. It's probably unlikely that someone is going to come out from Alewife and then bike all the way down the Minuteman Bikeway and then come all the way up to Lexington and then come all the way into Burlington. That would be, some people would do that perhaps.
Sure.
That's sort of a stretch.
It's a little bit much for a morning commute.
But if you've ever been on the Minuteman Bikeway, in the morning and the afternoon, it is like a highway. People are speeding along on their bikes. They're going to work in Cambridge and Boston and things like that. And then in the reverse direction, there's a whole stream of people coming back into sort of the Lexington, Arlington area. So when we tabled this issue, they said out of all the amenities, having that something like a bike path is something that they're asked for that Burlington really doesn't offer yet. So it would be, for business reasons, it would be very helpful, and it would be nice for our residents who want to have additional recreation opportunities for biking could then use it. I've gone numerous times on that bike path. I drive to behind Friend Lumber and I park my car. Right now there's parking for about 6 cars, and it goes paved all the way into a neighborhood in Lexington. And then a little bit you go on through that neighborhood, and then the paved trail picks up again, and it keeps on going, then comes into another very nice neighborhood, and then you go a few blocks, sort of like a zigzag and a zag, up and around, and you actually can get to the Minuteman Bikeway if you would like, and you would have access to Bedford and Arlington and Lexington as you would. So that would be a major, major enhancement. It's something we don't have.
Right.
Okay, and
Something that people have been talking about for a while.
something people have been talking about, and would be really a transformational thing. Do you have time for another one? I have.
Real quick.
Okay. Another one is that we have a concept, the commission has been pushing this, the Conservation Commission, a river walk, and it would be a protected walkway starting all the way at the Flatbread Company, following Vine Brook, behind the hockey store, behind B&D Carpet, and through behind where Starbucks is, crosses over, and then the expensive part, it really gets expensive. We have a vision, okay, on both this committee and on conservation. We have this vision that someday we're going to have a boardwalk go right through the middle of the Vine Brook Aquifer, and it's going to connect to an existing boardwalk behind the Islamic Center.
Okay, nice.
Okay, and then it actually comes out. The district has a nice little walkway they created behind there. It goes down there, and Leahy Clinic also has a walkway on this side of Vine Brook, which it could connect to. And so we have visions that it would eventually end up at the Marriott, and we have visions that this Riverwalk would then also go behind. Eventually, we would reclaim a part of the property along on the Macy's side along Vine Brook there and have a walkway that way. Essentially, we would have a connected pathway through a large fraction of the town that the residents could sit and enjoy, have benches and so forth, and a nice protected pathway so we could have a nature type experience.
It'd be nice. It'd be nice to have a good experience in nature, like you said, like right in the heart of, between Mall Road and Middlesex Turnpike.
And
right in that.
I mean, we're getting to the point where we know we're connecting to the MWRA.
Right.
And the question is, can we put this valuable resource called the Vine Brook Aquifer District to use?
Yeah, absolutely. Well, a lot of interesting potential projects out there. I wish you luck with the committee, and I would like to thank you for coming in and sharing the possibilities with me and our viewers.
Thank you, Rich. There's one last thing I will just add, for a moment, is the way the community preservation works. It doesn't have to be my ideas or the Vote Yes committee's ideas or the conservation's ideas for open space. Anybody would be able to submit a proposal that could be considered. So whether you're from the residential community or the business community, those proposals would be received by a committee that would be formed if we vote this in, and those ideas could be very valuable.
Right. Harvest the ideas of everybody.
Right.
Let the good ones rise to the top. All right. Well, thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Rich.
Appreciate it.
So there you have it, a deep dive into the Community Preservation Act and whether or not Burlington should join from people who believe that it should. I'd like to thank all my guests for joining us this month. I'd also like to thank you for watching. We'll be back next month with another edition of BNews In Depth, so stay tuned.